Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I am back with a very, very exciting Geeking Over God episode. I know it's been a minute, but I'm really excited about today's conversation because we are talking about everything when it comes to books, beliefs, and beyond, a journey of ilm and loving God. And so today's episode of Geeking Over God, we have Awista, who's sharing everything about strengthening faith. So listeners, you're going to be diving into reflections on strengthening faith. And this episode in particular is going to invite you into the enriching journey of a woman's own spiritual growth through the exploration of religious literature, self-education, and the profound wisdom that Islam has, as shared by our guest, Awista. Join us as we delve into the realm of books, education, creativity, and as she shares valuable resources that will inspire all of our personal journeys towards having a deeper and richer connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Awista, how are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm doing well. I know there's a bit of a time difference, so we are in different time zones right now, so I appreciate you jumping on. Everybody, Awista is a creative soul with a background in secondary education, hence the title Books, Beliefs, and Beyond. And currently, which is super cool, she's developing a curriculum for 7th graders to 11th grade, if I got that correct. So really excited to kind of chat through all things books, education, Islamic journeys, and obviously as Ramadan is coming up, we'll hopefully conclude with sort of a game plan for all of us to be able to take on Ramadan as well. So lots to cover in today's conversation. So grab your beverage, grab your drink, whatever you have going on, and kind of take a deep dive. So let's kind of dive in. I'm really excited. I love to start off Geeking Over God with this beautiful opening question that kind of centers the tone of today's conversation as well. So I know it's a grand and it can be taken in so many different beautiful ways, but Awista, what does loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean to you?
It depends. Like if you had asked me maybe a few years ago, I would have been a different answer. But recently, I just think like loving God is essentially giving our whole selves to Allah. And I just before we got on the podcast, I talked to you about like giving up coffee. What I'm trying to do, I suppose, recently is to give up anything that I'm slightly even addicted to in any way, whether it's healthy or not healthy, any addiction, because I think for me now, loving Allah means to give my whole self to Allah without ever having parts that's oriented towards anything but Allah. And to give ourselves to Allah, for me, it is, I guess, to give each moment its rightful due and each person its rightful due.
That's super awesome to hear. I love to hear that. And so really we have this first section that I want to dive into in terms of, books, education, and an Islamic journey. I'd love to hear about, generally from the beginning, like what sparked your interest in Islam, and specifically like, you share so many beautiful resources when it comes to reading on your own channel. So how has your reading journey specifically contributed to your understanding of the deen?
Honestly, the two are intertwined because I started reading after high school. So obviously I was born a Muslim. I'm Afghan, born in Pakistan, grew up in Pakistan until 9, came to Australia. And so I had that very strong cultural Islam influence growing up. But then when I went to, when I came to Australia and I went to a public school, there was that other side of things where it was like secular education, like friends of all cultures. And I felt like growing up, I had this two identities. And I wanted to fit in both, but like it was basically two different people. And then towards the end of high school, what happened was when like I remember when the career counselors were like, what do you want to be? What do you want to apply to? I was like, oh, I don't know, like which personality do I choose? And essentially I came to this like internal conflict, and you could call it existential crisis. And I just didn't know who I was, which then led me to questioning deeper. And that's when I finished high school, I took some time off and I just wanted to know, because I literally couldn't sleep. I remember like towards the end of high school, I would sit in the common room, which is what we call the room where all the senior students are. And I was looking at everyone laughing and I was like, why are they so happy? Like, like, why aren't they questioning things? Like, how did you know who they are? And so I took that time off and I just needed to know answers. That's when I turned to books. You're probably like, well, what was with the tangent? But I was just explaining how I got to books. And it was that seeking for answers for like the deeper questions, because I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know myself outside of like trying to fit in, with the Western culture. Like, I used to, when I was younger, I didn't say that I knew how to speak Farsi or I know how to speak Urdu. I'd be like, when people were like, when did you come to Australia? I'd be like, at 4, like, push it younger. So it seemed like age. Um, so, I really needed to know who I was and what my life's purpose was. And that's when I actually turned to books. And the first book I read were on like mindset and like how to be better. But I realized soon that those books didn't give me the answer, because like, self-help books will help you be a better you. But if I didn't even know who I was, like I didn't get any help from like what was I trying to be better at? I didn't know the thing that I was, essentially. And so then I remember this was when my brother was like listening to the OG Norman Ali Khan. I don't know if you've ever listened to him, but he was listening to him and I was like, who is he? I want to listen to him. And then that's when my journey, I started listening to lectures, and so that's where my practice of Islam began, through that and more. But the two intertwined, because whilst I was doing the lectures and learning Islam, I was like, oh, I can actually get Islamic books. And then I remember I got the Sirah by Ibn Kathir. That was one of the first series I got. Didn't read it. It was very scholarly, but but it led me to the path of, you know, like the books and literature of Islam. And then obviously learning that how the importance of knowledge in Islam. And so it enhanced my love of reading. So because I had embarked on the journey already, but I didn't, the love of it came from Islam. Especially have you heard of the Hadith Qudsi? Some debate whether it's a Hadith Qudsi or like another narration from Dawood alayhi salam, but um it's essentially Allah saying, the Prophet I'm asking him, oh Allah, like why did you create creation for? Or like Dawood alayhi salam, depending on, the opinion. And then Allah says, I was a hidden treasure that loved to be known, and I created man in order to be known. And for me, it's like this, I love to be known. Like there's this intertwined like relationship of loving and knowing. So the more you know, the more you'll love, and the more you love, the more you want to know. And for me, reading, it's just not about the physical book. It's about, like, I enjoy the process, but it's also like a means to knowing. And anything we know, it's like partial, whether it's like about God or not God, or whether it's Islamic book, it's all partial knowledge that leads to the ultimate knowledge, which is Allah. And Allah's beyond comprehension. So then the journey never ends. So then my collection never ends. And yeah, that's essentially why I read and how it relates to my Islam.
That's so beautiful. I love that because you said it. You said it so like the more you know, the more you love. I'm gonna butcher that, but I'm gonna write that down in my journal because that's literally so beautifully summed. Is the more you love Allah, right? The more you love your deen, you want to know more. Knowledge is power, but also seeking knowledge is a worship, is a form of worship as well. Like it's ibadah as well. As you learn more and more, you also you taste the sweetness, I think, and subhanAllah, different people have different sort of the feelings of tasting the sweetness of Iman. And maybe perhaps I'm jumping the gun. Maybe that does stem from, for you, from reading, diving deeper into some of these religious texts. Because for me, my sweet spot is reading the Quran, but also alongside English, because I don't understand Arabic. And when I can, for the first time, when I read the Quran, like cover to cover, but with English translation as well, I felt, that was a really pivotal moment for me in my relationship with Allah, because I started to feel and started to understand what Allah was telling me, like telling us. And so, subhanAllah, I love your point about you just keep craving more and more because you're so enamored by it. And Islam is so beautiful in that way that if you keep having that desire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to keep putting that guidance and love into your own soul. So subhanAllah, very, very beautiful. So speaking of, I know now you kind of encompass what that reading journey kind of came to, or how it came about. And so specifically, you emphasize at the end of your answer to the question about, books, that kind of takes form in books when it comes to playing a pivotal role. So I would love to dive deeper a little bit on that. Like, how have books played a pivotal role in shaping your understanding of religion, and specifically like your journey with Islam as well?
Like, I just love books. It has a pivotal role in every aspect of my life. With Islamic knowledge, though, I tend to, I don't start off any Islamic science. Like, I don't like, it's not the gateway to the science anytime. I usually make sure that I learn from teachers, because I think it's very important that I don't just open a book on in any aspect of religion and then try to just learn it all through that. So I make sure that I watch lectures or like do live classes in Melbourne with like sheikhs and sheikhas. And then once I'm in that world, then that books come in, because then I get obsessed with things. I've had so many interests in my life. So like any class I go to, it becomes like my, like, I dive deeply into it through books, and I like to, and then it just, I always find it hard to really explain what reading does, like that experience, like you explained it, like it's that sweetness, but it's just like being in this, it's not, for me, it's not a passive activity. It's like this, um, it's just like, it's magical, alhamdulillah. Like, it's stimulating activity where like I'm having a conversation with like the great minds. And Islamic literature, like we have so much, alhamdulillah, like so much that I didn't know through great books, Islam. So it shaped my iman in that. I remember specifically reading one book called The Tower of Islam. And I was like going through the pages and I was like screaming. I was like, I love you, God. And I literally went, I was on a Facebook group, like I was doing a 99 names course, and I was like on the Facebook group, and then I went, and because it was like we were talking about, like everyone would post about the experience of God. So I was like, I'm just reading this book, PSA, I love God and you should all love God. So that's like what reading does. It just makes me, it's like, how there is a quote, now I forget who it's by, I think it's Rumi, but or like it's a Quranic, or it's a hadith, or there's different like versions of that, but it's essentially that all of knowledge you can know, it's like it's just a drop in the ocean. There's so much, and it's just, there's something about learning new things, and especially Islam, because it's like my favorite topic. It's a constant. I have many interests, but the underlying is Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yeah, reading just gives me that without, it's the most easiest to access as well. Alhamdulillah.
I love, and that's exactly, you summed it up. That's what geeking over God is. Like that, I've had so many of those like geeking moments where you're like, oh my Allah, like this is so cool. Like this is awesome, and everyone should love God. Or like every time you said that, I felt it. I knew exactly what you meant by that. And so speaking of, you mentioned a few that have kind of were the beginning, but if you wanted to sum up, like, can you share a few perhaps recent, must reads, or just your go-tos? Like what would you recommend? And perhaps, what are must reads that have significantly influenced your perspective of Islam, faith, spirituality, that you can share and impart to us? And inshallah, I'll link them down below as best as I can if I find them.
I can show it to you as well. Like that background.
Okay. Yeah.
I will give you a few that I read recently that's like fresh on my mind. So the 4 books, I just mentioned before about the book that I was like, oh my God, I love God. And that was this one, the Tower of Islam. Sorry, the camera's gonna be mirrored. But it's the Tower of Islam by Sachiko Murata. And yeah, it's just, it's a heavy read. It's a textbook type of read. But essentially it's about like gender relations in Islam, and just speaking about, like the 99 names, the names of Jalal, and the names of, the names of beauty and majesty, and how that manifests in the world and in the genders, and like how essentially it's like a tafsir of the ayah when we've created you in pairs. Like essentially this whole book is talking about that. And it's very like small, like writing, and
Oh my gosh.
I haven't read it back to back, but I've read most of it. It's just one of those very heavy books that I revisit. Yeah. And then we have one of my all-time favorites. I read it first in 2020, and then I've read it like 4 times since. And it's Islam and Secularism by Syed Muhammad Naquib al-Attas, Malaysian thinker, scholar, sheikh. And this is essentially about, Islam and secularism, but like how the Christian world was affected by it, and now how the Islam world is being affected by the ideologies of secularism, and then what we can do to prevent it, and like the causes of it, like essentially why secularism is entering the Muslim mind, etc. I love it. This has like influenced me so much in the curriculum writing, everything. Like it's one of the most impactful reads. The ideas in this have, it's just impacted so much of my life and how I think and how I write. Really recommend. Another classic Islamic literature is, do you know of the scholar Imam al-Ghazali? So this is his biography. It goes by different titles, but it's his biography, and it's called, the popular title is Deliverance from Error. Essentially, he talks about how he was teaching, was a popular sheikh of his time. People would come from around the world and listen to him teach, but internally he wasn't sure of his intentions. So then he leaves his teaching and goes on this 10-year solitude journey and reflects. And he comes to, essentially, he takes away all of that which can be doubted in his worship of God, and then essentially reestablishes his belief of God through like full conviction with no doubts. So he questions everything that he had taken for granted. And it's this journey, and it's just amazing, and it's very impactful and powerful. I really love it. I love Imam Ghazali. I have a whole section in my bookshelf, so it's this section.
A whole section.
And then a recent read, which is not Islamic scholar, it's a Christian scholar, but like the topic is very timely, which is this one, and it's called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Trueman. And it's essentially about the history of sexuality, identity, and personhood. What does it mean? Human nature, essentially, and how it was understood and how we got to where we are in the modern day. And I've just found it to be, I actually created a unit from this book, mainly this book as a resource for my 11s, and they loved the unit. And it's just an amazing resource, I think, to understand the current, from a religious framework, because he's Christian.
Exactly. I was going to say that's super timely, very top of mind in today's discourse, especially with like everything going on in terms of things that are also topics that are seeping into secular academics. As you said, especially in the 7th to 11th grade, when it comes to, we call high school. I don't know if it's called.
We call it high school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. I love that. It's so important to be able to address some of these topics sooner than later in the correct lens. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of those resources. I will link them down below, inshallah. And so as you touch upon, this realm of education as well. And so I wanted to kind of dive deeper into, in this world of education, how do you believe like the system in place can better support individuals that are on their own path of self-education when it comes to, religion? Because at times you have different journeys when it's self-education of religion, as you're navigating some of other components that comes with education, such as post-secondary school and things like that. So how do you what do you believe is the right approach here, or how can we sort of work together to create a better support system for these individuals on this path?
I mean, I don't know if like the education system wants to encourage religious education necessarily. I think one of the things I learned from like the book that I mentioned, Islam and Secularism, is it was eye-opening in the sense that I thought growing up that secular education is neutral, and that you can have this secular education and not be affected by religious beliefs, and then just pray your 5 daily prayers, whatever. But then but there's always like, the internal doubts or whatever it was, or like not even if doubts, but there was something missing. Like, why couldn't I piece everything together? And it was because then, realizing that it was the education system, the secular education system, to be specific, is very intentional in its message of essentially taking God out of the picture and giving you a worldview devoid of God and the cultivation of virtues and things like that. So it's just like learning things for the sake of production, like whether it's like a workforce, whatever it is, it's to make you good citizens being to produce and contribute to the market and capitalism, etc. And then so I don't know if that can essentially, it will ever have the power to encourage matters of religion, or it wants to. But I think what we can do as individuals ourselves is to really understand what secular education is, so that we're not foolishly or blindly or unknowingly or innocently even following it and thinking that it is the ultimate truth, and then I can be strong in my faith. Because I'll give you an example. In Year 9 curriculum, for example, like in history classes in Australia anyway, like just as they're learning about, the roaring 20s, how women found empowerment, the skirts got shorter. That's essentially like one of the lessons on fashion. And then like in science class, they're learning how the brain develops because like evolution, essentially all of the messages in English, the text they're reading, it's about like, this conflict between God and science. Like those are the kind of texts they're reading. Essentially the message is like you're growing up, you're getting like the seeds are getting planted in you that, we were in this dark ages, we were barbaric, and then you needed, like, there was God, sometimes there were sacrifices, and he was so backward, and then we found science, there was a renaissance, and we had the Enlightenment, and then now we are away from the dark ages. And in an obvious way, like we know that that's not true, but because if you go through the 13 years of education, then uni on top of it, the plants are there. You might just pick out on a shallow way, like, oh, I know that's not what I believe. But you really have to do the work of digging deeper. And then also learning what the Islamic worldview is. So in terms of how the education system as a whole, I think that's a long-term goal. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I think on an individual level, like we can personally try to really just, unravel the messages and like what is secular education, to then also feed ourselves, like, because once you can't just like not be without a worldview, you have to have something you're standing on. So whilst you're breaking that world apart, you have to really like strengthen yourself and stand on the Islamic worldview and what does it mean to have a Tawheed vision of things. Yeah. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it
does, yeah. It's beautiful. And to your point, you can get so easily lost. I think as someone who just recently finished up a master's degree, so I've been in school and education for quite some time now, and it's when you don't know the Islamic point of view, it's scary to have these, like you said, things be dropped for so many years, and to that be slowly but surely sort of ingrained in sort of your thinking and approach to the world. That I've seen it. I've heard those conversations about crises that arise when we're handed off this platter of science versus religion. When in Islam that contradiction doesn't exist, but oftentimes the narrative that is put in secular education is that's the worldview. Like we can't have both. And so I think the quicker, or as individuals, like you said, requires, we have to challenge ourselves to be really secure in our own understandings of deen, especially when it comes to some of these other topics, because otherwise you don't have the why, and when you don't have the why, it feels very purposeless at times as well. And so speaking of, like, I think that's kind of ties to this next bucket, great segue, this next bucket of our conversation today about your own spiritual development, because everyone's, when it comes to equipping yourself to be able to handle those conversations in the secular education world, it requires you to be at a certain level and comfortability and security in your own relationship with Allah, to be able to have those conversations and navigate those situations and not be broken down because of some of those questions that you might have. And so I would love to hopefully like learn, from you when it comes to the bucket of spiritual development and relationship with Allah, so that perhaps first and foremost I will learn, and then whoever is listening, inshallah, will also learn. So the first question that I have here, and you talk about this, a lot in beautiful ways, and so hopefully this speaks to really recent things that you've been learning and also incorporating, as per you've talked about in your channel. But how do you incorporate the belief and the connection to the 99 names of Allah into your daily life and spiritual practices? And perhaps maybe our audiences aren't sure why I kind of just sprung on the 99 names. So maybe you can give a little bit of a background as to your own connection to understanding those 99 names of Allah as well, because you've mentioned it on your channel, but maybe those who don't understand, that aspect of that transformation, you can kind of walk us through that as well.
The 99 names, I mentioned I did a course on it, but essentially the 99 name is the study of, or on the the knowledge of who Allah is in different ways. And so the thing that helped me, for example, like just as our conversation before, in my own spiritual path and confidence and relationship with God, was to learn about who God is, like who is God. And why am I worshiping God? Not, oh, I have faith in Islam. No, I have faith in God, and Islam is a part to God. And the legitimate, like the final revelation, but I want to know why God. So that was for me like Aqidah. That's when I studied Aqidah, and from there, like you learn the 13 essential attributes of God, like the very necessary attributes, like the oneness, dissimilarity, eternality, and things like that. And then from there, it was like, okay, more about God. Like there's this longing, because Aqidah changed my life. Like learning about God, it was like the whole of my education system. I was like listening to a lecture, like came, like it just like came done, like undone. Like it was like, I was able to see differently. I literally went the next morning and I saw the sunrise, and I was crying, because I'm like, Allah created this sun. Like, because like that's what the 99 name does for me, is to see, like it helps you to see God in it all, and not to treat your religious practices in the way that secularism or like secular education wants you to, in that compartmentalize it to a certain part. Because that's what secularism is, that you're religious, like in terms of religion, your religion is private. It should be in this. But my religion can't be private. Islam, like Allah is the basis of all. Where are we going to hide God? Allah is Allah is the all-knowing. Wherever we turn, there's the face of God. Like that's the Quranic eye. Like you can't hide Islam. To live Islam it's a, how we growing up, I would always say Islam is a way of life. Islam is a way of life. But it literally, like a way of life means it's in all parts of my life. And what the 99 name does is essentially it helps you. It's like a gateway to seeing God in all those moments. Like when you're feeling sad and constricted, you're like, oh, I'm not like just sad, but like it's Allah speaking to me to a name that speaks to that. He's the one that is al-Qabid, the one that constricts you. When you're feeling happy, what name of Allah is playing right now in the life? Because the thing I learned was that, like just there are 26 letters of the alphabet in the English language, and every word, every book, every text, every idea that's written down is from those letters. Without it, it wouldn't exist. So the 99 names is like the basis of all creation. Everything that we experience and have, and it's through the manifestations of one of those names. It's Allah's will working through, or like power, knowledge through one of those names. So when I'm experiencing, like, I love being in nature. When I'm in nature and I see the flowers, it's like, like the rain is stamped with the name al-Razaq. It nourishes the things around us. And yeah, so I just love the 99 names. And one of the practices I had very strongly during COVID, but not like, I try to follow it as like this year again, like I have the 99 names cards, but it's to essentially, anytime I'm feeling, I should probably do it in my happy moments, but I do it mostly when I'm like down, and I'm like, why? Like, like I need an answer. I open it and I like look for a name, and then it's just like, it's like a healing. And some of our scholars say that like the 99 names like a medicine cabinet. Like we have this treasure, like Allah is there, and he's there to heal you at any moment. If you just look at the name, what name is he like trying for you to know him through in this moment? because he was the hidden treasure that loved to be known. Everything that happens in our lives is so that we can know Allah and so we can worship him and love him. So what name is he speaking to us in this moment? So knowing Allah it gives me the confidence, it gives me the stability, it gives me a ground to stand on when I say, oh, like the modern world is this, society is coming to a ruins, what is happening? But in order to, Guy Ethan says, in order to kind of find the faults of society and pick at it, you have to have a ground to stand on. Like, where are you standing? And what the 99 names does is like, it roots you to God. Like, we are from God and we return to God, but it really makes that real. So what I'm saying, if I'm interjecting something, like if I'm disagreeing with something, it's because in some way, like I have a standing, and in some way might be in conflict with my Islam. And I'm not saying I have all the answers and, it's always like this amazing spiritual hype, but, I try my best. And I think, yeah, that's what the 99 names does. It roots me in God.
Alhamdulillah. Oh my gosh. Like, I'd imagine like that played a key role in building a relationship. When you know, it goes back to what
When
we
you know,
talked about.
you
Like,
know.
exactly. Like, when you know, and you cannot but help want to know more. Like, it's a continuous sort of like taste that you get, and you continuously want to absorb more. And so this kind of takes me into this next question is like, building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a personal journey. It's beautiful. You kind of understand Allah more with understanding 99 names, but we're beyond obviously learning more about Allah. Can you share some other experiences or perhaps like practices that have helped you strengthen this connection to cultivating this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how you went about that? So perhaps we can also kind of take and learn from it too.
Honestly, the number one thing that I think has helped me, and I mentioned just before, is learning Aqidah. Like, I don't know why I went, again, this like the secular education, the way we learn things is very fragmented. There's no beginning, there's no rootedness. You just learn. It's like everyone's a specialist in this little part and this little part. It's a lot of fragmentation. When you think about it, Tawheed means wholeness. It's to bring one, and Shirk is to make many. It's fragmentation. And so what Aqidah gave me was learning about God was this rootedness, and like I said, like everything just like all the wires in my brain just went in its rightful place. Like, because then you're able to see the world as a whole. Like, nothing is disconnected, fragmented. It's Tawheed, oneness. You see things in oneness. And it's obviously there's high levels of it, and like, the highest being to be in a level where you see nothing but God, like Ihsan is just worship God as if you see God. Even if you can't see him, he sees you. But we try our best. And so the best thing I learned and have done is to study Aqidah. And I study. It's one of my favorite topics, Aqidah being the creedal beliefs of Islam. Like, what do we believe about God? Who is God? Who are the angels? Who are the prophets? What does revelation mean? What is like the books mean? And then like also theology. So theology being proofs for the existence of God. And my husband is obsessed with this topic, and we both like love this topic because firstly, we have to be grounded. Why do I believe in God? How do I know God exists? Like, it's not just to go, it's you don't learn it only to go and like, do dawah, but it's essentially to fight the doubts that are within and then without. But first, like anytime anything comes, you're like, Allah exists. It takes you away from busying yourself with the nitty-gritty of like laws that your nafs might not like. But there are wisdoms behind everything, but you don't necessarily need to know the wisdom to consider it like legitimate. Because if you strengthen your relation with Allah, then it doesn't matter whether you like it in that moment. You can go on the journey of trying to figure out the wisdom. But at the beginning, it's like, did Allah say this? Is this from Allah? Halas. So then we have to really like strengthen that relation with Allah. Like, who is Allah? How do I get to? So Aqidah. And then one of the most powerful things that I was told and essentially brought me to my journey of studying Aqidah and asking for help. Like, I was lost. Like, I was going to take my hijab off. I was struggling with faith before studying all this. Someone just told me to wake up and pray tahajjud. And yeah, you just ask God. Like, you want to know the answers, you ask God. He's literally said, whoever asks of me in this time, I'll give it to him. Like, that's a guarantee from God. there's no guarantee that I can give, or like anyone can give. There's nothing that we can give that's greater than God's word. He literally says, "Wake up and I'll answer you. Wake up and I'll answer you. So wake up and you'll get your answers, inshallah." So those are the two things.
SubhanAllah. I mean, I would love to perhaps ask you just what has worked for you? How did you go about studying Aqidah? Like, there are so many different ways. Like, you know, you can open up a book, but of course, there's also proper sort of seminary like programs that exist. So, in your experience, or what has worked for you? Like, has it been a combination of both? You mentioned obviously learning from scholars and going to like live lectures that are in your near community. But what has worked for you when it goes about like, you know, because aqidah, you have to make sure you're learning it correctly as well. So, what has worked for you in terms of going about that?
So I didn't learn Aqidah from books because it's about like I've learned about worldviews. I read on that, like Islam and secularism. But I've done a diploma in Melbourne, so that's not helpful. But also Dean Stream, I really recommend. It's like a Netflix for Islamic lectures. So Dean Stream has Aqidah series by particularly by Dr. Umar Farouk Abdullah. That's the series that one of the first ones I watched, and and then he's got another series called uh, modernism on modernism, and those two, that was my initial beginning in the in Aqidah. So I recommend that. It's about $14 a month, 14 USD a month to sign up for it. So it's called Dean Stream. Yeah, there's many series on theology. I'm actually currently going through another one by Ustad Faraz. And then obviously finding sheikhs in your cities. For me, it's like I did the Muslim seminary in Melbourne. So if anyone is interested in is from Melbourne, but I can't talk obviously from other cities. But yeah, Dean Stream is where I would begin, inshallah.
That's super
And
cool.
then,
Okay, well,
sorry, and then my husband, who is very into like theology in that proofs for the existence of God. So I had a different journey, but he's a convert, so he listens to a lot of William Craig, who's a Christian
yes,
theologian.
and his exactly. It's almost. I mean, it's. I'm studying, or not studying, but taking a course on Islamic apologetics, and William Craig is often referred to, you know, his arguments about sort of theology and speaking to non-Muslims, right, about how God, you know, God is still in existence. So yeah, that's super cool.
Only to the point that to prove the existence of God. Obviously, he's a
Yes,
Christian,
yeah.
he believes in the Trinity and all that. We don't, but like to the point you get the ones that are aligned. But yeah, that's a good resource too. But I would recommend Dean Stream because for the creedal beliefs, and then there's like 10 Aqidah series on Dean Stream, and then there's different
Very
ones. There's
cool.
like theology as well, proofs, and the creedal. So really recommend that.
Okay, awesome. No, that's super, super cool. Well, we'll inshallah link that down below as well for y'all. We kind of earlier talked about this in our own previous conversations, just about how important tazkiyah is generally, right? Often described in our Islamic teachings, but also a personal sort of like reflecting point for you as well about tazkiyah. So I would love to just hear about how has that impacted your own spiritual journey?
Wow, my friend. Like I said, I currently gave up coffee and it's been very hard. Like it's been like what, 8, 9 days. But essentially, why did I just say that? Because essentially what tazkiyah or self-purification is to give up all the I's so that it's only Allah, Allah, Allah. Like it's just essentially to empty yourself from yourself so that you can fill yourself with Allah and the remembrance of God. Um, so that's what spirituality is. Even the things that you might think it's like, oh, am I addicted? Like, so that's what on a personal level, what I'm doing is like, I took off 110 days from all social media, and then I went on it and then I deactivated it again. I was like, I don't want to be here. But like specifically to check my relationship with everything to see where is it too much of me and the thing. And now I'm trying to do that with coffee and maybe it's sugar, and then we'll move on so that there's nothing that I'm reliant on or dependent on, and it's only Allah. Like, and that's not where we begin. We begin with the like with our recommended acts, like with the what Sharia recommends. But then there's different levels, and essentially self tazkiyah is to rid ourselves of from everything that is not Allah, and that's what it means. And again, want to come back to what we discussed before. One of the other most impactful thing for me to understand, like, self purification was the Hadith Jibril. like the great hadith, like the Islam being getting like Islam, Iman, Ihsan aspect. So the Islam aspect being the actions, the things we must do, like the 5 pillars, and it's to like get our bodies right so that our bodies are only remembering Allah. And then there's the Iman aspect. It's to get our thinking right, our minds right, so that it's only seeing Allah, which is like all the aqidah and stuff to see and understand God. And then there's the ihsan, to get our hearts right so that it's only reliant on God. And so, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is work through my addiction, anything that makes me weak and holds me down, so that, because Allah wants us to reach our full potential. He put us here for a purpose. Like what I'm here for, what I can offer the world, you can't. And what you can offer the world, I can't, because He doesn't create, He doesn't create anything in vain or without purpose or He doesn't create the same thing over and over again. Like He creates whatever He's put on this earth, which is me, when I think about myself. It's here for a reason, and I want to know, and I want to not be weak, and I want to purify myself. For me, also, purification is healing. Every time I purify myself, I actualize something in me because that wasn't there, because I wasn't yet healed in those parts. So like last night I was like crying because I was like, I've also had sugar. I'm like, I haven't had sugar and coffee. I have no energy. And my husband's like, are you okay? But it's like, it's hard. I don't want to give up on it. Like it's very hard, but because I'm so reliant on it. But I know that if I can overcome this, inshallah, please make dua, because early days I might give up. But something will come that I don't know yet of, and don't have any knowledge of, because where I stand, my husband always says this: what you understand is under where you stand. And only after I can only expand that once I move and push myself to do what I haven't done before and purify myself, as long as it's oriented towards God. And yeah, sorry, my answers are like super long, and that's how I think.
It's so, I'm learning so much because I've thought about it, but I like it, you put it into so much perspective in terms of taking away anything that puts you down. And I think when you take that chance on figuring it out, it's life-changing. You just need to be patient in figuring it out, because sometimes you lie to yourself that, the coffee helps me or whatever it might be. But once you kind of push back that and sort of revision what, purification looks like, inshallah, only for the best. And you just need to, like you said, it's waiting for you, perhaps. It's really waiting for you.
Not that there's anything wrong with cough particularly. It's just me seeing anywhere where I'm too reliant on that thing. And it could be different. If you're not like that, the first, like I said, the beginning is to get our body, in terms of bodily actions, the 5 pillars. We have to master that. That's just where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I love it. I love it. It's so awesome to hear. Speaking of this last bucket of our conversation today, ideally will inspire all of us to sort of get our game plans going, because, in the beginning of the year, one of a favorite of mine in terms of your videos, you talked about leveling up, right? Goal setting for 2024. And I would love to kind of, in the end of this conversation, kind of help us, allow you to help us sort of understand how we can level up Ramadan in terms of goal setting when it comes to Sharia. But before we get there, right, first question in this bucket of goals and resources that I have is to that point about sharing resources. So in your channel, you often do share, resources that benefit others on their journey to Islam. So for us, here, can we just have a sort of recap and summary? Could you highlight a few resources that have been particularly impactful for you when it comes to your journey, your strengthening of Islam, and your relationship with Allah?
Well, outside of the ones that's just local, I'd say Dean Stream. So it doesn't just have Aqidah lectures. There's like, it's like Netflix, but Islamic lecture series. And then I do a lot of the short courses from Cambridge Muslim College. And then I like the podcast Blogging Theology. One of the most and then the books I mentioned, so Islam and Secularism above all, and obviously the Quran is like the number one priority, but because we all know it, so I'm not mentioning that. And then the Sira book that I read recently, Yasir Qadhi's Sira, the book. So there's a lecture series if you're someone that wants to listen to that. It's 120 episode, but there's also an actual book. Really, yeah, recommend those. Outside of I just talked about it for ages, but yeah,
Yeah,
inshallah.
perfect. And all those, inshallah, will be linked below. I might need you to send me these so I can keep track as well. Super cool, super awesome. As Ramadan is coming up, let's kind of pivot and talk about what could be a realistic, maintainable Ramadan game plan for all of us to sort of think about and get adjusted to ahead of time. Because subhanallah, like inshallah, Allahumma baligh Ramadan, like we make it and we want to try to put in our best foot forward in Ramadan. So how do you use, because you've done this in your channel before about generally setting ourselves up for success for the year, how do you use the same Islamic principles and Sharia to set and achieve personal goals, but specifically in that context of Ramadan? So how can you leverage, what we already know, but how do we do that in goal setting when it comes to Ramadan specifically?
Oh, well, I'm no expert. In terms of goal setting in the year and like Ramadan, it'll be a bit different. So I wouldn't use the same method. So if you watched my video, I use the Maqasid Sharia to goal set for the year. Maqasid Sharia being the principles and the aims of Sharia. But I recently watched a lecture by a brother who was recently in Melbourne, Muhammad Isaac, and he talks about the nature of Ramadan. And it gets back to like what I said at the beginning, loving Allah means to give every moment its rightful due. And so like because whatever Allah creates, each moment, each month, each day has a certain purpose. Why is it here and what does it want from us? And so he was talking on the nature of Ramadan, and then he made me reflect just broadly on like what I was speaking to you about. And now, like, so Allah created Ramadan, like this month. What is the purpose? Like that's how I learn things. I try to go back to the purpose, like when we're talking about education, etc. So what is the purpose of Ramadan? Like it was the month of Quran. That's the only goal you need. The fulfill the purpose is to immerse yourself in the world of, the Quran. Like whether it's the English, like if you can read Arabic, like, and obviously the other purpose is to fast. I don't think I tend to not like the way I goal set is not to overwhelm myself and try to make it this like thing that it's not like, don't come to it through a capitalist a secular worldview where it's like I have to do this, like there's this ticking checklist without actually being fully in it. I might read like a little bit, but if I'm like fully immersed in it. So that's how I approach it. I don't know if it's the right way or the wrong way. But yeah, so what is the purpose of Ramadan? It's the month of Quran and the month of fasting. And that's the number one priority. It's just I don't want to like set goals on like these are the books I'm going to reread in Ramadan. No, the Quran is what I'm going to read. Like that's what Allah wants from us. Like it's literally called the month of the Quran. It's like you take away all distractions so you can focus on the word of God and be with God. And I think, yeah, there's already so much like, especially because most of us go to work or like study. Um, I mean, I'm not a scholar, but like I think like there's so much like that our bodies have to go through in the month. Like there's no need to be pile up goals that's unattainable when all Allah wants us to give up food and like, fast, meet the requirements of the fast and then be with his word. Like that, be with his word in the capacity that you can, whether it's English. And I also can read Arabic, but don't understand it. So do need that translation. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Exactly, exactly. Well, I love that. And so specifically, like, is there, and you kind of, I mean, you spoke to this, so if it's redundant, like, feel free to, we can kind of move on. But is there anything specific you're doing when it comes to prioritizing Quran in Ramadan? Like, how do you go about navigating that? So, in terms of Ramadan in mind, how are you curating that game plan, perhaps with the Quran and all these steps during the month? Because as you said, we have a lot going on as just individuals partaking in this in society. But how are you making sure you are personally, and whatever those goals are, right? They're very subjective and individual, but inshallah, touching upon being with the Quran. For you, what does that look like tangibly? And how are you going to go about making sure you're prioritizing those goals in Ramadan?
Sorry, just before I answer that, I just remembered another good resource because I'm like this is I'm currently like enrolled in an Arabic course, and like it took a while to find something that's like that I would love and like it's attainable online. So Rabat, it's by Sister Tamara Gray, and
Sorry, her videos about tahajjud, like,
yeah,
subhanallah, life changing with Yaqeen
no,
Institute.
it's her institution.
Oh,
So
cool, cool, cool.
yeah, I
Okay.
signed up. So inshallah, I'm only like in the very beginner. Like I started from the beginning, even though I know Arabic, because like it also teaches you vocabulary at the same time. So I don't want to miss on the basic vocab. But it's been really good, and I really recommend Rabat, or like I don't know the full website's name, but like I'll tell you about the link. But yeah, if anyone wants to read Arabic, like learn how to speak Arabic, I think it's a great resource. In terms of goal planning with Quran. Sorry, I didn't want to touch too much on like the Maqasid Sharia. So if anyone's interested, plug in, get in my channel and see like how you can use the Maqasid for Sharia for goal planning. In terms of Quran, if you just, I'll recommend, again, depends on your work thing, but you really have to, like, if you can, try to take work easy. I'm lucky because I work with the Islamic organization, so we finish earlier, but to wake up earlier and then just read as many pages as you are capable. If you actually just read 20 pages, you can finish the Quran. What I personally do is just try to like read a few pages in the morning, and then I think the easy way is to like read it after every prayer. Like one of the things that's helped me with my reading of the Quran is like, with all of the adab of the Quran, sometimes I'd get overwhelmed. Like I wouldn't even like, because I made it like this big thing that I have to do, which it is like you're literally speaking, like you literally exposing yourself to the word of God. But like if you get to the point where it overwhelms you so much that you don't do anything about it, like which it has to me, then what I would recommend is to just read on your phone. You don't have to have the like actual, like, because I feel like there's this sense of being casualness that comes with the phone. Like you're like, it doesn't seem like, so just leave your phone nearby, and then after you pray, like, just open your phone and read it on the app. Another translation is the Penguin Classics translation that I've been reading. I just love the copy of the book as well. I have this thing about the way books feel as well. So like it's very like, it feels like I'm holding a novel. So the way it's not like, because sometimes when I'm holding them, like the Arabic Quran, it's like I have to be in a certain state, and like, and then sometimes like, oh, I have to do all these things. I don't know if I want to read the Quran. But if you can just make it as easy for yourself, and then inshallah work your way up. So for me, the translation by Penguin Classics, and then use your phone and just get rid of social media. I don't want to preach, but like if you honestly, I've started to read so much more, even on my phone. Every time I open my phone, I'm like, oh, there's nothing to do. And then I
You
just
don't,
read.
you're not scrolling anymore.
But you're not on social media
I'm
either.
not on
So
social media, yes. And that was, I mean, that I have a video on that, and that was, I can second that. It's life changing, subhanAllah.
so if you just get rid of social media for the month, or like even if you don't want to deactivate, just delete the app, maybe keep it on your web browser. And then anytime you're going to go on social media, just read the Quran on your Quran app.
Yeah, amazing. I love to hear that. This kind of, subhanAllah, I don't know how our conversation has flown so quickly. Like, I'm literally on the last question here before the official last question that I love to ask all my guests. For those who, of course, we are grounding ourselves, inshallah, with Quran in mind, that this is the month of Quran. But for those who are perhaps still trying to incorporate, right, if it's part of their routine in terms of still pursuing like their own education in terms of religion and spirituality, like how would you go about incorporating learning still and spiritual growth into their own Ramadan routines, in addition to some of course Quranic goals as well?
Honestly, what I aim to do, inshallah, this Ramadan is to have like memorize more of the du'as of like the daily du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, because and so that, because what does it do? What do these du'as do when we wake up, when we sleep, when we go to the bath? It makes us become like, it awakens us to the moment. It brings us to life. It blesses the moment, and it is a constant reminder of Allah. And so I think, if you read the Quran and then constantly be in this state of awareness of Allah through that's what I'm doing. Now, I don't know if like that's a goal you want, but that's how I want to embody like spirituality. And also like in terms of like eating, to just not like as I'm saying, I was giving up on certain foods because that's a bad relationship I have, like this attachment with like junk food. So what I want to do is this Ramadan to, kind of step back and continue the diet that I've already started, inshallah, and eat what is necessary and not overdo it. So that's my spiritual, I guess, struggle, but each to their own. So if I think the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, it's something that we should all try to learn. It's just so powerful, inshallah.
I love to hear that. Well, that kind of takes us to the end of our conversation. And I love to ask this last question because I've learned so much from hearing what other people's reflections are. So, what is a lesson learned that you know now that you wish you could tell your younger self? And this can be anything and everything, but anything that's perhaps resonated with you so far in being your best Muslim self.
Honestly, that Allah loves you. Allah loves me. I wish I knew that growing up so that I didn't need to pretend to be a certain way and I could just be me. Like if I knew that Allah loved me and I was enough and I had a purpose, that's what I just want everyone to know that Allah loves you, Allah loves me, and Allah is just, I don't know, it's just the most empowering thing. So I wish I knew that when I was younger.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end our conversation today, wherever in the world you are in terms of your time zone, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. And subhanAllah, I was just attending a lecture about that. It was titled When the Righteous Slip. And, being able to navigate slipping up because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never not be there for you. Oftentimes if we give up. It's us giving up on Allah and just reminding ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like you said, loves us. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast and really just diving into the world of ilm, but loving Allah through all books and readings, whatever it might be, incorporating these resources that you've outlined into our own, day-to-day about increasing our relationship. So thank you again for sharing everything that you have thus far with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Of course, right back at you. Well, ladies, you heard it from Awista herself. Today in our conversation, in an episode of Geeking Over God, we talked all things about the enriching journey of just spiritual growth through religious literature, your own self-education, and just what wisdom Islam has to share with us. Thank you so much for listening, and inshallah, I will catch you on another episode of Geeking Over God. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.